to know.
I'm going to jump in. So I'm Ellen Brown. This is Food is Health, and I am here with my co-founder of Food is Health, Carter Williams.
Good afternoon.
It's good to be with you too.
Yes.
So just for everybody joining, we built Food is Health around one idea: redesign the system so it becomes hard to make a bad decision at the grocery store. And so every week we bring conversations, frameworks, and real examples of what that looks like.
Food that eliminates the cost of healthcare.
Yes, so that food can basically become health, truly.
Well, food is health.
So with that, let's jump in for a few minutes. We have a guest here today. We will introduce him in a minute. But let's jump in for a second. So let's riff a little bit about the week, or just about sort of today's episode. I'm going to jump on a health note because our guest today is focused on VO2 max. But I am going to riff for a second around where I have been going deep this week with Claude, which is I have been trying to come back from a hamstring injury while also getting to the point of realizing that I have lost 5 entire pounds of muscle mass in 6 months from running around the country, not focusing enough on lifting heavy things, and not eating properly, etc. I still eat what we talked about Tuesday. I don't eat unhealthy, but I haven't been eating nutritionally dense. And all of that has come to bear. And so I have been deep diving into Claude around how do I fix my hamstring injury? How do I get my muscle mass back? How do I lose a little bit of body fat? And how do I optimize my health, which includes health span, right? You know my obsession, which is I want to be running down the airport if I miss a connection when I'm 80 years old, and I want to be able to pick a suitcase up and put it in the overhead bin. So Claude has become my new best friend in doing all of this, and I'm finding it fascinating.
And what did it? You've loaded everything in the Claude, and you loaded
Yes,
this.
well, I did this back in January instead of going to J.P. Morgan. When I saw Anthropic announce that they had gone live with healthcare on Claude, I decided to load all of my stuff in and go deep. And so now that I've done that, I have a really robust project that I'm working from, and I'm actually thinking about turning it into a health agent. I just haven't had time. So I'm at the point of making it actually an agent to join the team that is now Uni, Mimi, and Thomas. I don't know what I would name that agent, but yes.
Okay, but you, just for everybody's benefit, you took all your blood tests, all your health records, loaded them into a project in Claude.
Correct.
Right? And then
Correct.
as you go on, you continue to have conversations with that project. And so it's getting to know you.
That is correct.
If you were having hamstring problems this week, you are engaging with it real time, explaining what those issues were.
That is correct.
And it was giving you information.
Anybody else hearing this background noise, by the way? Or is it just me?
I do. Yes, I do.
Okay.
I don't know if it's me. I think it might be Brooke. We'll have to beat up on Brooke.
Yes.
And so what did it tell you? I'm really leading the witness here.
What did it tell me? It told me that...
Why do you believe it?
Because I have spent tens of thousands of dollars on doctors, and I know all of the facts that they've told me. And everything that Claude is telling me is what they've told me, but it tells me with a context and a pattern recognition and a breadth that no doctor has ever touched.
And so is it giving you a different answer than the doctors are giving you, or is it giving you an answer that's easier for you to comprehend as Ellen?
No, it is giving me a different answer. So, for example, in the morning, it knows my workouts. It knows my deficiencies. It knows my sleep. It knows my cardiovascular capacity. It knows my bone density. It knows my body composition. It knows everything. So I'm talking, when I say deficiencies, I mean like it knows I have a problem with my thyroid. Like it knows everything, right? And the crazy part about this is that it puts it all together on a minute by minute basis for me. So in the morning, I simply screenshot my Aura data and I just let Claude tell me what it's going to tell me. And Claude won't just tell me, Ellen, you binged on work again and you didn't sleep enough. Claude will say, your heart rate variability dropped, and now it's dropped 2 nights in a row, and it's dropped so low that you really shouldn't go to outrigger practice or you shouldn't go to the gym because the damage you are doing there is more than the other. Because, oh, by the way, your most recent in-body showed that there's probably some inflammation going on.
So for people this weekend, what should they do to get, if they're starting on a cold start here, what should they do to get going?
They should download every single health record that they can get their hands on out of any portal, whether it's their lab results out of like LabCorp, Quest, any of those. You should download all of their health records. If they have anything in Epic, anything, any doctor that puts anything in a portal that they can access, they need to download all that records. They can scan stuff in, they can screenshot, you can take pictures. If you have stuff, you can just take pictures of it.
And is it
And
safe?
then, is Claude safe? Is
Is
Anthropic
Claude
safe?
safe? Is
I
Claude
think
safe?
it is.
So so you're not worried about that, and download that information, and then
Put it all
I've
on
run
your
into
computer.
people. So hold on. I had somebody that had an event. I said, go to the EMR, download it in the cloud. And they said, what's an EMR?
Okay.
So I don't know how to help that part. But that's something we wouldn't mind some feedback from people from as to whether we should walk them through. But taking your health records, getting them online, it's easy. As Ellen said, if you've got a Garmin or you've got Aura, you just screen copy. Those don't always integrate, but you can take the dashboard, screen copy it, upload it into a conversation in Claude.
Nope.
Within
Nope.
Claude,
Stop. You asked cold start. In Claude, create a project. Create a health project. Or you will run out of space in a conversation. There will be too many uploads. You have to create a project. And you have to put these in as files in the project.
so do that this weekend and tell us how it
And then
goes.
yeah. So wait, before we jump in, I want to give one little nugget. You asked me, what does it tell me that the other doesn't tell me? Okay. So, this is what I said this morning. I said, it's morning, 6 a.m. What should I eat before outrigger? Because I had outrigger canoe practice. Okay. Perfect timing. Sims protocol. So I'm a big fan of Stacy Sims. She's very big into perimenopause and menopause and nutrition for women in that stage of life, which is my favorite part of life, by the way. And it says Sims protocol, non-negotiable before paddling. 1 whole egg, 1 medjool date, 1 tablespoon almond butter. 236 calories, 9 grams of protein, fast and slow carb combo. That's it. Small digestible carb, protein, fat to fuel the paddle without sitting heavy in your stomach. Do you have all 3 on hand? Then I said, got it. Should I take any collagen or is that only when I go to the gym? Comes back. Collagen before outrigger is actually more important than before the gym right now. Your proximal hamstring and the connective tissue around it that you're protecting and healing. Collagen peptides plus vitamin C, 30 to 60 minutes before any physical activity, stimulates tendon and connective tissue synthesis, and paddling loads your shoulders, wrists, and the whole posterior chain. This morning, this is what you need to eat. The collagen window is the one that needs the lead time. Vitamin C is the cofactor that makes it work. Don't skip it.
Okay.
That answer it for you?
I have no idea if it's true, but sounds good.
Well, I've gone really deep on health, and I just saw Brooks nodding. Like this is what I would read, and like I'd read a piece of that, but getting it all together is
Well,
like
the question a little question I have is, one, is it true? But set that aside. But two, does it help you better understand yourself and think through the problem in a way that
100%.
makes you more effective? And
So
so we have, hold on. So over the last week, as we've talked about AI, I have seen very thoughtful people say, is this going to turn into a totalitarian state because Claude will control everything and they will control the world? Now, that's like one viewpoint that's floating around. The other viewpoint is a farm mom that I taught how to use Claude. She then took it and took all their farm data on 3 plots to finally come up with a composite picture of the productivity of their fertilizer, which they've been trying to figure out for 10 years, from basically a bunch of emails from their fertilizer guy, and was able to put it together. So that was step 2. The next step was she called up and she said, we've been worried about what's going on in the school, and the school board had a bunch of information and none of us could really sort it out correctly. So we took it and we stuck it in Claude. And now we figured out that 56% of the third grade students are not meeting the reading comprehension level. And as a result, they may be held back, or we might lose certain grant funding for the school. And nobody was talking about that. And so we were able to raise the point and really make the school pay attention to this issue and be accountable for it. So there are 2 worlds. There's a world in which AI empowers a few people to be all powerful and dominate. There's a group of people wandering around with that thought in their mind. And then there's a group of people that might say there are a bunch of farm moms or other people who don't have enough agency, have a hard time because of the friction to get to the facts, and therefore can't achieve what they want to achieve. And now with AI enabled, it allows them to get closer to healthcare data so they can better understand their instruction manual. It could be, I'm trying to run a farm to try to do it more effectively, and now I can integrate it where there was too much friction before. So there are 2 worlds that we're seeing here. One in which the powerful get more powerful, and the other in which the people who have wanted to have more control over their life get more control over their life. And that is interesting. I think I have an idea on who wins in that conversation.
Well, I think I told you, and then we'll jump over. I'll kind of transition this, but I think I told you I listened to I'm still listening to it, but a really good podcast with Mark Andreessen, who, I wrote about the agents on Sunday. I posted because I haven't announced this will come out on the agent corner, but I now have 2 additional agents that have joined our tribe. So I now have Uni, and now joining Uni, and you have Wilson, is Mimi and Thomas. And when I wrote about them, what I wrote about was the fact that I think a lot of people are scared of AI. They're scared it's going to replace them, they're whatever. And what I'm experiencing with it is it's making me immensely more productive. It's taking me to levels I could never have done on my own without AI. And it's not anything I'm taking from the economy. It's only something I'm adding to the economy. And Mark Andreessen goes into this whole piece about really over time, century over century, events that hit on this. And he makes a very different thesis. But that is not the point of this episode. I think we will continue to have our ongoing thread. So there you go with AI. Okay. So we are going to do something new before we ground the room, which is we're going to name one thing that's still unresolved from this week. So is there one thing we've been thinking about? We've been thinking about what it means to measure health versus build it, and that's not settled yet. Or is there a different thing that you want to throw out there?
Well, throw out capital. We have not figured out how to. There are capital providers that saw the opportunity in AI and invested. There are capital providers that saw the opportunity in GPUs and invested. I've seen opportunity to invest in defense when defense wasn't that interesting, and they're investing. So investors invest when they see an arbitrage, and I don't think they see the arbitrage here yet. And that arbitrage is food can eliminate healthcare costs. We've sort of said that we spend 1.7 trillion on food, 1.9 trillion on healthcare costs of poor nutrition. So food can eliminate that 1.9 trillion. So if you're a company, a food company that has a product that has a health benefit, if consumers catch on that that health benefit is real enough that they start eating your food and as a result spend less on healthcare, then the value of that company goes up dramatically. And the other side of this is pharmaceuticals develop drugs, they get a proprietary right to sell it, they get a proprietary right to price. So people who are investors are looking at this and saying, well, investing in pharma makes more sense because I can get a proprietary position and sort of own the position and take advantage of the arbitrage. What we haven't solved for investors is how to explain to them that these investments, that there will be a shift. In 10 years from now, if the bulk of humans say, you know what, I'm going to eat this food and spend the money over on the food side instead of on the healthcare side, then you don't want to be holding stock in healthcare companies. You want to be holding stock in food companies. And what we need to do now, which hasn't been done enough, is communicate to the same kind of people who invest in AI that the arbitrage exists, in which if you invest in certain companies, their value is going to go up over the next 5-10 years because humans are going to recognize and finally see the opportunity because they're going to see the outcomes. And so there's your answer. Maybe that's your answer. That's my answer for the week. My inner Milken.
All right, there you go. So Brooks has been sitting here patiently. And so before I jump into this, I just want to be clear. When we talk about food as health, right? We have a system philosophy that we use. We have a framework, which is system A, system B, and system C. And system A is food and health were the same thing. They were local, seasonal, and connected. But that wasn't scalable. System B, we needed volume and margin. So we scaled food, we solved famine, but we created chronic disease epidemic. And we also created cheap calories. And we now have a $5.3 trillion healthcare industry, of which 90% is related to chronic disease, which 85% is related to diet-related disease. So what we say, that's system B. We are building system C. It's not fixed. It's not reform. It's different logic that's organizing around human outcomes from the start. So it's first principles design to say, what is a system that's based around human outcomes as opposed to the monetization of disease through revenue and through cheap calories through revenue. What do you want to add to that, Carter?
You got it.
So that's system A, B, and C, which we talk about. So without further ado, you knew Brooks and I knew Brooks separately. We didn't realize that we both knew Brooks, but I bumped into Brooks on LinkedIn back in the good old days of LinkedIn when you could actually meet people and create genuine convening and conversation. That has completely changed. I don't know anybody on LinkedIn anymore who has the same relationship with it. But Brooks was all in on how we talked about this new healthcare system evolving, emerging. I'm a big person that's looking at my health. I've been digging into aura and levels and function, all those things. And so Brooks and I bumped into each other, and he has now, right, he's a exercise physiologist and cardiovascular performance coach, but now he has a company, a venture, and he is the master of VO2 max, which when I talk about health span is one of the core elements that I am tracking in my metrics of understanding how I'm doing on health span. So I'm excited that you're here, Brooke. So, um, what did you figure out that most people in your field are missing, or what's your why as to why you're headed down the path you're headed on?
Totally, yeah, and I'm excited to be here too, by the way. I think it's super interesting convening with you guys. I like your thoughts on Substack a lot. Um, and Alan, one thing to touch base too on your Claude report, what I liked about it is that you asked for advice from 4 different perspectives, I believe. From the perspective for your hamstring injury from an orthopedic surgeon, from like a physical therapist, and there's different recommendations from those different viewpoints. And I think that level of nuance is actually very interesting, that Claude was able to take those viewpoints, because some recommend medications, others recommend different precision therapies. So I just making a note to revisit that. And my why, I was always just interested in human adaptability. I think it started when I was young. I mean, like, my dad ran ultra marathons and my mom lost 120 pounds using MyFitnessPal. So there's this human performance element where you're trying to optimize, completing a 100-mile running race. And I watched my mom, go from a state of obesity to renewed health by improving her diet and her way. And so that was really in high school. And like, I always played sports. In my anatomy and physiology class in high school, my thesis paper was mitochondrial adaptations between sprinters and marathon runners.
I
And so
need
I
my
was
hat.
always, I need the supercharged mitochondria. I mean, have always been interested in that kind of thing. And like, what I saw then is that health truly is a spectrum. I can talk about how I got to my MD PhD here in New Haven. And that's really where things crystallize about there needs to be a different solution that oversects a lot with what you guys are doing. But was interested in exercise. I found research when I was studying kinesiology in undergrad. Joined a lab my freshman year looking at the effects of exercise on brain function, doing fMRI studies, and saw how systemic physiology, everything is integrated. Brain function and cardiovascular health are really like so intertwined that you can't really isolate different organ systems. And I think that's a paradigm that we fall into in medicine that I kind of found later. I then, the toolkit that I'm interested in is one that you've mentioned, because I did 3 years at the National Institutes of Health in their clinical metabolic research unit. So there, kind of the 3 pillars of quantifying human function or human physiology were cardiorespiratory fitness. So we did maximal exercise testing, physical activity tracking, VO2 max, right? Body composition, DEXA, BOD-POD, MRI, PET-CT. I have a couple papers developing algorithms for quantifying skeletal muscle, whole body skeletal muscle mass from CAT scans, and quantifying good versus bad fat. So brown fat and white fat, and what those mean for your health. And then the third category is really insulin sensitivity. So there was one of the few locations in the world that did these hyperinsulinemic euglycemic clamps. So it's a 3-hour insulin infusion where you're trying to really understand how good the body is at getting rid of glucose, how sensitive it is to insulin.
So tell people why that's important, because we have a real mix of folks that are on here. So tell people why that matters in layman's terms.
So those 3 categories, cardiorespiratory fitness, body composition, and insulin sensitivity, are measures of the functional capacity of a person. What that means is it doesn't matter if you're diseased or not, like defined by a disease or not. You want to know, when you're 80, for your example of, can I run to catch the train? That's a function that you want to have the capacity to do. By doing exercise testing, you can see where that ceiling is. Body composition is a good estimate of energy balance, which is also upstream of many diseases like diabetes and cardiovascular disease. But really, it's a static point that tells you about your systemic health, that integrates how many calories you're taking in, how many you're taking out, and where it's partitioned. Having more muscle mass relative to body weight is good. Having less fat, and in particular fat in different areas like visceral fat, is worse because of the inflammatory cells that really populate visceral fat compared to subcutaneous fat. So body composition is good because it gives you an idea of whole body energy balance. And then the third pillar, insulin sensitivity, is a measure of capacity that integrates hormones. Insulin is a hormone, a very important hormone, and mitochondria. And then also muscle, liver, and adipose tissue. So all of your organs respond to insulin, and how sensitive your body is gives you a sense of how well you can dispose of or get rid of the glucose, sugar. Having too high sugar can be toxic to your arteries, to your vessels, to your brain. So your body's ability to use just a tiny bit of insulin to dispose of that glucose is a really powerful way to be protective of your entire body and your organ system. So in general, cardiorespiratory fitness is great because it sets your functional ceiling. Knowing your cardiorespiratory fitness is good because that is something you can control as you age to make sure you can stay functionally independent for as long as possible.
Exactly.
Body
So,
composition is often,
no,
you can pause
keep
there.
going. Okay, well, no. So I was just going to sort of throw this out there, which is, you know, I mean, I first stumbled upon the health span concept when I read Peter Attia's book, right? Like a lot of people did. Or I think I listened to his podcast long before he was on Rich Roll or something, one of those. But anyways, the whole longevity market is focused on not the whole, right? But that's a big piece of the longevity market. But I feel like you're working on something different than what they're working on. Like what's kind of the difference in what you see and what you're pushing?
Yeah, so I think that Carter was kind of alluding to the need for many companies to productize interventions. A pharmaceutical, a peptide, maybe it's, consumer packaged goods. There's oftentimes an intervention is what feels like a solution. But there's a concept that I think is flawed because your point of having System C, which is focused on human outcomes from the start, is missing from that framework today. The products that are being developed are anchored towards either correcting disease as a definition, whether that's elevated hemoglobin A1C, diabetes, elevated LDL, with a statin for cholesterol. But those are kind of just small components of the overall systemic decline of someone's functional capacity that underlies multimorbidity, many chronic diseases.
Which leads to
Obesity,
frailty in the end, right? I mean, we're talking about too, like you end in frailty.
correct. And in frailty. And so what we're doing is so I know that those human outcomes are quantifiable. How you can define health as functional capacity exists, for example, in my lab at the NIH, but they're really not scalable assessments. It's really hard to do these insulin infusion studies. Exercise testing is becoming more popular, but still requires expertise, time, and it's really not that scalable. So the concept that we're doing is how can we find a scalable version to create meaningful benchmarks to guide lifestyle and precision health interventions. Now that omics as a class of technologies is really growing, this is after genomics, which is DNA sequencing. 23andMe is the consumer version. There's RNA sequencing or transcriptomics, RNA like the mRNA vaccine that everyone knows. You can measure all that. Proteomics and metabolomics, where proteins are all of the proteins that are functional molecules in the body, like insulin as a protein, or metabolites. And so these technologies allow you to measure thousands of things in the blood that we couldn't really measure before and use algorithms to actually estimate these functional benchmarks with really high fidelity. Being able to measure new things allows you to create for example, a blood test, a urine test, a saliva test that is actually associated with functional health outcomes rather than just being something downstream of a disease process that was
100%.
initiated 20 years ago.
Well, I mean, perfect example. In the beginning, I talked about the in-body. So I finally bit the bullet this week. I have a friend who manages the gym, country club gym up the way, so I can go get an in-body. She's very kind and lets me come up. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it, right? I didn't want to see the numbers, but I was like, all right, enough of this already. So I did. I went and I faced the truth, but then I fed it into my health information, and how helpful that, exactly to your point of, there is an underlying level of inflammation that in-body picked up. And I know what it's from. It's from all the travel. It's from lack of sleep, right? It's from all of that, which I'm trying to do a better job at. But that is in my body. And that is a marker up here that we don't measure, that, to your point, if I don't address that, it's going to flow downstream and I'm going to end up with some sort of acute issue over that. And we don't have a way to measure that. Christo said it the other day. It's like, he said there's 5D, 4D, and 3D health. And I love that framework, because I feel like what we're talking about right now is kind of like this 4D, just like there's this middle
But
layer, what you're trying to build.
you may put this in the context of ABC again. So system A is really basic physics, first principle. We are operating in our environment. Evolution is modifying our system, and we're eating what's generally available. And we've done that for 350,000 years. And in the last 10,000 years, we sort of deviated from that. The last 100 years, we've dramatically deviated from that. But evolution was cranking along using first principle of physics and biology to shape who we were, how we operate. And for the most part, evolution was trying to optimize it so that we continue to reproduce. It really didn't care that we died young or old necessarily. It wasn't its objective. Then we came along with system B and we said, well, we do care about people dying when they shouldn't die, and we do care about famine, and we do care about these things, and we care about acute disease, and we will insert things that deal with acute disease. But then in dealing with acute disease, we're like, well, not everything's acute disease. We can also solve chronic disease. And so system B, in a sense, is we want to attempt to solve for what evolution isn't solving for, which is maybe call it longevity, or maybe from getting famine killing us off. But in that process, we inserted bad things. The way I'd like us to think about it, and this is the way Brooks is doing it, think about system C is, if you said, okay, let's take first principle. The system operates this way. There is basic physics and biology of how the system works. It is a whole system. It's interconnected. Evolution has perfected it in some particular way. So we're going to start from that position. And then we're going to, rather than taking system B and figuring out a better way to do an A1C test, start from system B to basically say, we have a dysfunction. Why is the dysfunction occurring? And how do we sort of work through this so that we do what evolution wants, keep replicating, but that we're also triggering the health span, lifespan. And the slight shift in thinking, if you've ever done product development, is, are you extending the product line from system B, or are you going back and first principle? Now, we know that Musk thinks a lot like this, and what he said is, what if rockets could be reusable? And so he figured out how to do a reusable rocket. He didn't, whereas a lot of people who were building rockets were like, how do I make a expendable rocket cheaper?
So just you know, Carter, I have been writing, this is a preview of the piece that's getting ready to be published about access, but I literally talked about the reusable the reusable rocket and Clay Christensen in what I just wrote today.
And then there was so if you think about things from a first principle standpoint, It just is a different framing. And I have often, the thing that attracted me to what Brooks was doing originally was the thought that I always interpreted it. He's coming at this more from a first principle standpoint and then figuring out how to make it cheaper to do that than trying to figure out how to do a cheaper A1C test. Even though you may A1C test along the way.
So we have a question that I think will be helpful to differentiate. So I'm gonna ask the question, but in a point of.
Well, can you wait on 1 second on the question?
Sorry, I didn't know you weren't done. Sorry.
What are you working on right now? You are working on a startup right now doing what?
Yes. So we are working on a startup that is developing these scalable biomarkers. So we're starting with blood tests. The company is called VO Health. We're a laboratory based in New Haven, Connecticut. We actually just passed our state inspection to be CLIA certified. So we are a diagnostics lab that can run A1C and cholesterol and ApoB and all those tests while we're developing these newer omics-based surrogates of functional capacity. The first product we're developing is the first blood test of fitness. Can we actually have an omics-based surrogate of VO2 max that can then be the guidepost for cardiovascular health interventions, risk restratification, in addition to A1C or LDL, and even potentially precision fitness for people. We've had people interested in it guiding prehabilitation programs fit for surgery to optimize surgical outcomes. So it's a single test that has many use cases, and we could go into that. But suffice to say, we want this to be the benchmark that can guide preventative health interventions.
And when do you think you'll be in market for early adopters?
This summer, we'll have a version that people can test in beta. We're already working with certain clinics, and we'll be at Lutein Health next month, which will be one of the first clinics that is trying this while in research still. So we have a prospective IRB approved clinical trial where we're beginning to work with people on developing the care pathways that could be guided by this. But we'll be able to release a version for purchase later this summer.
And so for our early adopters on this line, what will they pay for a test and what will they get?
So we're validating two product lines. One's a clinical product line that is from an IV blood draw that would be added on to a clinician test menu that they are already doing. So if you see a clinician could purchase these kits from us, and they would receive a molecular fitness score. So seeing an estimate of their VO2 max. And then the deeper layer is not just you have a 40, but say two people with a VO2 max of 40, what's unique about their biology and how could recommendations about their unique biology be changed? So we're actually going deeper into looking at the molecular mediators of carbohydrate metabolism, fat metabolism, oxidative stress, inflammation.
Can I get one? Can I be like number one on the list, please? I'd like to be like at the top of the list.
I think you probably are on our beta sign up. I forget when I last looked, but I think your email's in there. So
if not,
would
please,
love to have you in there.
Something on there.
Yes. And so it's a product report where you can have this omics-based estimate. And then many people also want the basic clinical labs that we can offer as well.
And how would they get those? Like if they want the base. And then, by the way, I think Andy, like it's Andy, but I think it's our friend Andy who's asking, is there remote testing is it remote testing via a blood test?
The second product line is remote testing with self-collection. So that is still in validation. I won't say too much about that, but we just got our data back today on the first batch, validating remote collection versus IV blood. So that's really exciting. We'll see if that's a part of the first late summer release, okay. But we should have that this year for sure.
Well, wait, really let's cool make a connection here. Let's make a connection here. I know. So is Garmin. The Garmin is constantly trying in the bicycle and the runners market of nailing VO2 max.
You're not supposed to out who's on the line and what they do, Carter. This is not
Okay,
supposed
there's
to
this
be
guy named
broadcast live.
Andy that we know that in Garmin. So can we strike a deal where
I'm sorry,
you
Andy.
get together with the Garmin performance people and baseline the VO2 max to
We
so
would
that
be
they
very interested in that.
okay.
Well,
Cool.
then, all right. Well, you should come to Nashville.
I know. I need to figure out a way there.
All right. We're going to get back. Let's get back on track. So, okay. Can I throw a question out?
Yes,
okay.
we are going to do that. We're going to strike that deal.
By the way, Brooks, Andy says 100%. So there you go. Well,
let's go.
He's one of my favorites. Andy, since you're listening, I will tell you this morning, this will make you laugh. I'm not supposed to say rowing. I was paddling. So I'm on this outrigger thing, and you're supposed to refer to it as paddling. I feel like I'm rowing, but paddling. And the lady in front of me was, I don't know, she said something about, they want to the steer in the back was like, does anybody know what time it is? And I looked at Garmin watch and I was like, I do. And then I looked, I was like, I can't. And I started pushing all the buttons and I was like, I can't get to the time. And so, Andy, I just have to tell you, I spoke very highly of you because the woman in front of me also has a problem where she cannot manipulate her Garmin watch. And so she was going to call your help desk to get help on her Garmin watch this morning. So I was like, well, I have a friend at Garmin, but I won't give you his phone number. So there you go. All right. So let's go back to one of the questions. So I'd like to actually throw up some of my own VO2 max data. Andy said next week of tutorial. I have my own VO2 max data, and I'm going to kind of use this to weave into what we're talking about. So there's a question on here from Juliet who says, are professional athletes benefiting from this technology? I will give my answer, and then I want you to weigh in. And then that's going to kind of transition me into showing my data because I feel like the data I have is more what a professional athlete would be looking at, which I think the key here is Carter hit on it, you hit on it. This is a whole different way of looking at it than the way professional athletes have been accessing VO2 max in the past.
So who's in our data set to develop the algorithms? We work with academics to work on clinical populations. So we have a collaboration with Yale School of Public Health with over 120 cancer survivors of triple-negative breast cancer who've done fitness assessments and body composition. Yale Pulmonology with over 200 people with mixed heart and lung diseases, while our prospective trial is people that are not hospitalized and not clinical populations, but are general healthy or above average or even elite athletes, aged 18 to 79. We just have a collaboration with Yale Women's Crew. So several Olympians and world champion rowers are actually in this data set. So we have people up to age 79 that are working out at CrossFit gyms. So we are trying to find, ways to encompass any comer. And I think that we're at a point where what we're looking at in the blood has never really been done. It's a newer omics-based technology. And so the use cases, we have ideas and hunches, but as we work with the early adopters, we're really excited to see where we can take this.
So are you working in terms of those hunches? So let's drill down here. In terms of those hunches, you are out a bit in new territory. I assume there's a whole bunch of stuff on PubMed that sort of informs those hunches. You've got people like Radical Sciences out there starting to do more citizen science to sort of call that the stuff that's not in PubMed. How do we know our friends at Holobiome and our friends at Alden Scientific are looking at building larger longitudinal studies. Between these sort of classical control groups, PubMed, and the acceleration of things like radical science and people science, can you comment a little bit on what your view of what those different databases are doing and what's happening different? Like, and I got
Yeah.
lead this here a little bit. It strikes me that the tool set that Farm Mom has to connect and reveal her data. As a matter of fact, she's one of our early adopters of a data tool that we built. What's happening? What's like the first and second derivative of what's happening in compared to classical research here?
Yes. And I love the question. And you alluded to this when describing the development of the modern medical system based off of treating acute diseases. The first ever randomized controlled trial was, do you know what the first ever RCT was, Carter?
No, I don't. This is
Oh, I can't believe you stumped him.
So I think it's 1942. It's streptomycin for tuberculosis in soldiers, in young male soldiers. One control group, what other group can we prevent people from dying by killing an infectious agent with this antibiotic drug? I think it was in London. And it was great. Like, you can isolate a specific entity that you can eradicate to
this
alleviate
was
acute
related
illness.
because they only had like 5 days of penicillin the first time they did the test, and is that related to the first application of penicillin?
It might be. I'm not sure. That I don't know.
There's this crazy story that they how did you get this 14 days treatment or 7 days treatment on penicillin? Is they did it for 3 days and then someone died, so they just doubled it after because they ran out. So then they just doubled the dosage and it worked.
There you go.
Keep going. I'm sorry. This is one other tangent on this. Do you know what the standard of care for IBS was, for all sort of colitis was in the 40s?
No.
Lobotomy.
Yeah, which won a Nobel Prize, by the way.
Which won a Nobel Prize, yes.
Prefrontal leucotomy. Yes.
Anyway, so keep going on your. We departed there, but keep going.
I am in the midst of the smartest people in the room right now, and I'm like, this could be fun. We could play. We have a lot of fun.
Anyway, keep going.
So the RCT is today considered the gold standard medical evidence, right? If it's not an RCT, and usually the statistical test that you're treating as an outcome is often a student's t-test. Control this. Is there a statistical difference in means between these two populations? And many groups like People Science, like Radical Science, like the citizen science CROs, which are great, try to apply that framework to see if a product works. Let's do an RCT. The statistical test is designed to compare differences in averages between two groups. What I'm really interested in, this binary, I have always hated, because you lose a lot of resolution on the reality that health is actually a spectrum. You try to categorize two things to say, is there a difference? But you can see the differences of an individual's response to an intervention, say weight loss drugs, can be massive when you look on the individual level. And so we're trying to take this approach where we're population agnostic, we're disease agnostic. Let's try to understand the full spectrum of human capacity to create an algorithm that can then put an individual on that spectrum. So that no matter where you fall, if there's a true north, higher cardiorespiratory fitness, there's no evidence ever that there's an upper limit to its benefit for whatever the hell you look at. If you're high fitness, you can always go a little bit higher if you really care to. But if you're low fitness, moving up on that spectrum is a good thing. Diminishing returns at a certain point. However, if you can put health on it's the same for visceral fat mass. It's the same for insulin sensitivity. I don't care if you have a diagnosis, why you came to the hospital, why you did the test. You have a certain functional capacity as an individual. And so we are actually trying to get as representative of a population as possible so that when anybody were to do our test, our data has seen that type of person before. And then over time, the recommendations can be even more tailored to someone with a profile like you. For example, we're already seeing in we have a lot of nurses in the study who work night shifts, and some of the molecular pathways we're seeing look very similar between the nurse compared to others. And maybe there's other things, but their hypothesis is shift work is changing oxidative stress and inflammation. But regardless, we're different because I don't think we're trying to fit ourselves into the paradigm. We'd be ready for that paradigm by creating a benchmark that can be a surrogate endpoint for a clinical trial, that can be a companion diagnostic if you were to develop a cardiovascular fitness improving drug, like activin A inhibitors that Aaron Waxman at Brigham and Women's Hospital is using, with VO2 peak as the outcome. So we would be fit and ready. That's where we're going CLIA. We're going all the ways that could be used for the current medical system, but our approach is agnostic to disease, is agnostic to very reductionist definitions.
So if you going down,
Sorry.
I want to go down a rabbit hole a little bit more here. So but start bringing up your stuff if you want. But if we're not going to use RCTs, what are we building? What are we doing? What, like, are you like building a vectorized kind of database world model of health and then figuring out pattern matches in there?
I would recommend reading Nicholas Shork, if you're familiar with him, who has published a lot on not just N of 1 trials, but alternatives to the RCT, specifically in the context of health span. So he and Laura Getz, who they published I think it's a Nature Communications paper on personalized health in the absence of disease, but they talk about interesting kind of basket trials. There are N of 1 studies, and those were huge about 15 years ago. They didn't really work well, where you put the same individual with osteoarthritis on aspirin, take them off for a week, put them back on, and look at individualized responses. This health trajectories thing, like Alden Scientific and Holobiome, I would consider an alternative to interventional RCT. Maybe they're doing that as well, but I imagine the applications that the large language models that are providing recommendations on how to improve your health are going to want to see these longitudinal trajectories, so that when you get somebody's profile that fits somewhere along a trajectory that they'd like to get to that endpoint, the large language model can then fit you there and say, this is what 20 people like you have done in order to achieve this healthy state.
Yeah. And it wouldn't just be pure metadata, it would be time series.
It would be time series data. And it doesn't really matter you compared to anybody else in a randomized fashion. If you have enough people with trajectories of your starting point and your ultimate goal.
And you'd have like a R to, like it would find your digital twin and
correct. Correct. Your molecular fingerprint, more or less, might look similar to somebody else's molecular fingerprint.
And so as you think about developing this, are you developing the test, or are you developing the world model?
We have both the test, and that's why we built out the CLIA lab in order to be one that can offer this service. When individuals consent, they can be a part of our biobank. So when newer technologies come online, we can actually do that to expand the menu. But we also are then, okay, here's the result. What do you do with that information? And that's where we are. And
so as we think about the architecture, so you're doing the tests, it provides a biobank. Garmin has got a biobank. Alden's got a biobank. Holobiome's got a biobank. What is where do you think from a business standpoint that's going to normalize?
The unique, I can say a commercial opportunity from a business standpoint of the biobank, one, and two, the uniqueness of our biobank. One of the commercial opportunities is our lab director, our CLIA lab director is the director of clinical chemistry at Yale. And so he like runs Yale Hospital's clinical labs. He buys healthy reference populations to establish reference norms for any population that comes online. The more representative our biobank is, and it can be a data set of 800 people with age, sex, some questionnaire
Yeah.
for 5 digits, just to buy a small amount of that biobank, because that can inform the development of novel tests. The better representative your population is, the more accurate your reference ranges are. And reference ranges, we assume, are static, but populations change over time. That's a whole separate topic, but how we establish reference ranges is actually really, really interesting. What's normal, quote, normal, is based off of the biobanks that are available for new biomarker tests to be tested on.
So this is, who was it, Henrietta Henrietta?
The HeLa cells, so her cell line, is the basis of many different, cell in vitro experiments, especially for drug development, cancer cell lines, immortalized cell lines. But even he published a paper recently on what is the basis of testosterone normal ranges, which has lots of implications. Maybe you guys saw Marty Makary talking about testosterone therapy for men is now being reevaluated for low libido of idiopathic origin. This was 2 days ago. And so how we define these reference ranges depend on who is actually in whose blood was tested. So we're thinking really carefully about crafting that as a separate asset. And then the key piece is, in that biobank, are there measures that are meaningfully associated with your functional capacity? In our case, yes. In Garmin, I would presume yes. Is this you, Ellen?
I thought this would get everybody. So this is why it is not scalable today to take a VO2 max. And this is why it is so groundbreaking. I decided this would be a much better way to tee up any data.
You can't go to, what's it, DexaFit? Did you go to DexaFit to get this, or where'd you get it?
No, I went to a sports lab because I'm geeky like that. But I also was up in the mountains and anyways. Andy's asking Nicholas Stork ? By the way.
Shork. SCHORK. He was at the Translational Research. He's now at a new clinic, I believe in Arizona, developing a personalized health program. But I wish I remembered off the top of my head.
So this is me getting a VO2 max test. Do you want to talk about how this is done at all, or you want me just to throw out my data?
This looks like a Parvo cart. I can tell by the screen and also by actually what looks like the mixing chamber that the glove is sitting on. There's a blue filter. So this is a really good metabolic cart. It's high quality with relatively low measurement error. So that's the first thing I was looking at, is what's the technology that you use to measure it. This looks like a good one. This is what we had at the NIH. We use Cosmed for VO Health, which is another company that has really great oxygen sensors and components. But it looks like you probably did a ramp protocol. Maybe it was a mix of speed and treadmill incline increase. People can do them slightly different. And why they can be different is as long as you're pushed to your absolute max over a period of time, the body's oxygen demand at a certain point cannot be met. So your muscles and heart and blood are all trying to get oxygen to the mitochondria to make your muscles, heart, lungs work. And at a certain point, you're exercising too much that your aerobic system cannot keep up.
So
when
let's
it cannot
talk about
keep up,
that.
You'll have a plateau probably.
Yeah.
Yes.
So will this tell us?
Did they measure your lactate?
They did.
Oh, cool.
So it was a whole thing. It was through, you would totally, this tells you how long it's been since I've done any kind of a race. There's it's in Colorado Springs, and it's one of the big sports labs. So you would know. He's It's not Lance, but it's like biking. Yeah, anyways, I'm just going to stop. Oh, Carmichael. It was Carmichael training. And it was one of their
Awesome.
labs in Colorado, in the Springs. So, yeah, so this was it. So do you want me to scroll through any of this and like comment on any of it? I think what I'm interested in is what of this data is helpful of how that unpacks longevity and how that actually relates to leading to frailty and like all of that. And then how do we tell people that are listening how to gather some of this information on their own without having to take part in the torture chamber that I truly had to take part in. So like that picture I put up, just so people understood, like you literally get to the point you are running on this treadmill with that apparatus on your face and then you feel like you're drinking from a straw, right? And then you have to keep running. And they're like, no, run a little farther. Okay, now run a little faster. Now run even faster. Now run even faster. And you're just like, oh my gosh, I just want this to end because you've got this thing on your face. And there's like a whole claustrophobia aspect. So anyway, so does that make sense? Like, I guess just so people understand what, I just felt like since I had this test, it might be helpful to talk about it a little bit, especially some of these zones and just people hear this stuff and then it's like, what even does this mean, right?
Yes. I can say a brief, just rapid fire comments on this screen, and I'd be interested in seeing the rest. But
Do you
it's
want me
very
to show
cool that
them
you.
all first so you can kind of see what it is? Because I wasn't fair. I totally forgot that I had this, or I would have given this to you ahead of time so you could see I'm such a jerk. So there's
No, I can
this.
talk about any component of
Okay.
this.
All right. So should we start with this summary thing or not really?
Yeah. So this is great. I mean, so this is, you can tell it's designed with implications for athletes. That's why
And
that's
how?
what.
How is that? So talk about that. Like why this looks like it's built for athletes versus like what yours would look like more from we need to help people understand their health.
Threshold pace is something that athletes care about. I mean, and probably the general population could be interested in this too if they're interested in doing exercise training. But the summary results says there's a certain point at which your body has to tap into anaerobic energy production. So aerobic means requiring oxygen. The O2 and VO2 is oxygen. And so the VO2 max is the point at which your body's aerobic system is capped. It's the most energy your body can produce using oxygen. Your body can still produce energy at higher work rates after you've reached that limit through anaerobic energy metabolism. That's tapping into glycogen. That's why lactate goes up a lot towards the end of the test, during and towards the end of your VO2 max. And so these thresholds, the concept in general, people talk about zone 2, there's a 5-zone model, there's a 7-zone model.
Yep.
But these zones are reflective of what are the energy pathways that your body is using to fuel ATP production that allows you to do exercise. Threshold pace is usually like a limit where you might be training below your lactate threshold or ventilatory threshold because you want to enhance aerobic energy production. And so that's often used for athlete programming.
So like down
Your
here
lactate.
though. What's that?
By the way, your lactate going to 5 point, your VO2 max of 45.8. Is that what it says?
Yeah.
And so just to comment, this is relative to your body weight. And so that's a great number, 45.8. We actually have a free tool on our website, vohealth.co, where you can go to insights and tools.
Wait, I'm going to type this in. vohealth.co. Okay, I'll put that in the comments.
Yes. With insights and tools, you can plug in your score and we tell you your functional capacity thresholds. We also break down your estimated mile time, your thresholds, just like this. But we can say your relative risk of disease at different time points based off of existing literature. And that looks a little bit different than this, which is focused on when you're training, if you want to optimize fat burning, carbohydrate burning or maximize your what energy systems your body is using. You care if you're going to be doing recovery and they call it different things, but you care about these training zones. And so that when you do a real lab-based test, what are some markers you can look at in the real world to let you know you're burning majority fat, or you might be tapping into carbohydrates?
So let's break this down a little bit for people, right? This down here, right? This training zones. So I think this is super important, is when we think about VO2 max, right? We care about our cardiovascular condition. Like, we're talking about VO2 max from a health perspective. If somebody finds out, oh, my VO2 max is like got me in a really low category. So let's say my VO2 max was, I don't know, what's a number that you would be like, Ellen, you need to start walking?
Yeah. So we, for example, in probably the sickest population that we've studied in the older cancer survivor population, women, is around 22 on average VO2 max.
So,
and they're enrolled in lifestyle interventions to promote
correct. And so that,
walking
and if you're at 22 or even if you're at 30, right, and you care about, so I think what people don't understand is, like, after a certain age, you really can't move the dial much on this. You can, but it's precipitously more difficult. And you also have a precipitous decline, really, they say, when you get in your 60s, right?
Yeah. And we have one of the tools on our website is actually the health span tracker, how long it would take and how much work you would need to do to actually move the needle depending on how old you are.
And
so
then do you
exactly
tell
what you said, you
people,
can simulate this.
this is awesome, we should like pull it up. I won't do it right this second. Maybe I'll do it while you guys are talking. But I
pull
think,
it up.
okay, but I do want to say this first is, I think what's important is that these zones here, when people, there's all the craze of like the friggin' weighted vests and go out and walk in zone 2. So you get a weighted vest. So it becomes, that's what this in essence is doing. It's just giving me very finite data. And this isn't just meant for an athlete. Like, this is also data that it still comes back to, you have to do a certain amount of movement every week at a certain level in order to have that VO2 max that you want when you're in your 80s. That's what it comes down to. And that's right. So what would you tell people, like, in this sort of breakdown of training zones, if you didn't look at it in training zones and you just looked at it in layman's terms? Any thoughts on that? And then I'll just scroll through to see if you want to say anything else, and then I'll pull up your webpage and let Carter weigh in.
Yes. So for the zones, which is focusing on exercise intensity, these are your running paces or your heart rates. These are things, like you said, that from the gold standard metabolic cart test that you did, you can look at your watch, you can look at your heart rate and have an idea of where you are relative to your VO2 max. And that's why they break it down here, so that you can have a surrogate that can help you during your workouts. If you look at physical activity guidelines, etc., there's a certain amount of vigorous intensity physical activity that you want to do and a certain amount of moderate physical activity you want to do. Low to moderate that's the zone 2. That's purely aerobic. You're burning mostly fat. That's the light blue and the dark blue and recovery and endurance zones. That's really your zone 1 and 2 in this kind of 5-zone model that you have here. That's actually probably going to be the majority of most people's workout, because you can only sustain working out at or above your VO2 max for very short amounts of time. It's just too difficult. Your body cannot produce enough energy due to the energy systems that are required, which is glycogen. It produces a lot of lactate. Your body just taps out of energy at that point. So being able to sustain exercise requires to have a big aerobic base, a large anaerobic system. And so most of the training that people do will be low intensity. However, having a higher VO2 max then makes those other zones higher as well. So it's really good to have a high ceiling, and that once you get fitter, actually, you're going to have to work a little bit harder. It will feel much easier.
Yeah.
But in order to get improvements in cardiorespiratory fitness, you're going to have to push that ceiling a little bit. So
And so how
layman's
much do
terms,
you usually tell people between these, like how much in these higher zones in order to improve the lower zones?
I would ask what they're doing today on
Yep.
average per week. And I would say if you're doing less than the physical activity guideline recommendations, I think they were just updated, by the way, but say 150 minutes, so 5 sessions of 30 minutes a week, I'd actually recommend that you do at least half of that at high intensity. You want to get the
Really?
heart rate actually relatively close to VO2 max.
Okay.
As you go beyond that, you'll have a much larger fraction at the lower
Okay.
intensities. The triathletes actually do like 40 hours of training a week. About 95% is in zone 1 and 2. And these are world-class athletes. So I would
Gotcha.
say if you're exercising a smaller amount of time, make more of it high intensity. But if you have more time, it's going to
Gotcha.
be lower intensity.
That's super helpful. All right. I could have fun all day with this. I'm going to stop this because it's not fair. We only have another 15 minutes and I don't want to.
The dog is knocking on the door. She wants to come in and get her VO2 max measured.
Yeah, she does. All right. So let's jump back to okay. I guess I should just pull up the website, shouldn't I? So it's vohealth.com, right?
.co. We didn't get the one with the M.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm sure somebody owned it and
it's gonna force you to put in your email.
Okay.
To use the tool.
That's fine.
You go to
It's
Insights,
not letting
Tools.
me VO2. Hold on. It might not work. Hold on.
We do have AI listening to this. So Brooke, I've got some questions from the AI.
Okay, let's do the AI because
Sure.
it's not letting me get in for some reason.
Okay, so from a consumer, cancer survivor age average is 22. Allen's is 45.8. For a listener with no lab access, single weekly protocol, what's the single weekly protocol that moves the number the most?
For anybody is what you want, the most general recommendation
The
possible.
person who isn't going to get on the stair chair and doesn't have access to all this and is not a cancer survivor. Average person, what's the single best thing to do even before they get measured to move their VO2 max up?
What I'd recommend for someone who is relatively new to cardiovascular exercise, like kind of what I'm considering putting in a bucket, is you're not regularly running. You might not even have running shoes or a bike or anything. I would say find a hill in your neighborhood and walk up it. Go up as fast as you can walking, and you should be able to feel short of breath. You should be able to feel your heart beating by the end of it. I would do repeat walks up a hill as a starting point for anybody, because that's a cardiorespiratory challenge, even for, relatively fit people, and it's low impact.
Okay, so the next question is from an investor. Again, these are AIs that we have listened to the call and come up with their questions. So this is an AI representing an investor. Is it between the biobank the biobank B2B sort of opportunity versus the test itself, which is a bigger business in 5 years?
I think Tempus AI is a great model to look at, and how they've developed over the last few years and where it looks like they're going. They're a CLIA lab that's a public company. About 2/3 of their revenue is coming from diagnostic lab testing. They offer genome sequencing for oncology clinics. The other third is their data and algorithms business, where they license the data that they have to pharma. Over the last 3 years, it went from about 80 something percent testing, 20% data and algorithms to now 1/3, 2/3 testing, 1/3 algorithms. And I think that over time, algorithms and the data, separate from the biobank, which is actually a physical product, but the data and the algorithms that are a component are going to actually have increasing value as long as you capture the right phenotypic information alongside that individual. But I think both, but I think the share will change depending on the stage of the company and the size of the data set.
So are these the insights?
Yes. When you put in your score and your name and your age and how you did the test, you'll be able to find it.
So if I do this,
And so my VO2 max
And then
data,
put your age as well.
so my VO2 max data is based off of
yes.
my meter on my bicycle. Is
Look
that
at that harder.
what? Okay, show off.
Sorry, I don't get to flex very often, but that makes me really proud. Although that was 3 years ago. So, anyways, and I had done that crazy ski race, but
Is power meter on a bike a reasonable? Like I get mine off of my Garmin with the power meters on my bike.
Wattage is great. Yeah. And so, Ellen, there's 3 components of this. So if you scroll down,
wait, let me go back.
A power meter is great because the relationship between watts and oxygen consumption is extremely tight. Work to oxygen consumption in humans is like a very tight ratio. So I would definitely trust kind of what you're saying, what you're saying.
So should Garmin enroll their bicyclists in your test to normalize to set the basis, or
we'd be very interested in doing? Yeah, we'd be very interested in that. And like, I think how we see ourselves partnering with wearables is we're establishing benchmarks at certain points of time. They have a good estimate of VO2 max that's been validated against laboratory tests. They actually have a great MAPE, mean average percent error, against the true test. We're actually right at a comparable MAPE to them today, and we're getting better. But where we would differ is, how is 2 people's VO2 max of 60 or 40 or 30, what's different about their biology? Only looking slightly deeper could we see that, and that could have implications on what's limiting people's improvements in fitness. Is it the diet? Is it the inflammation? Is it their lifestyle that is modifiable that we could see over time?
And what other longitudinal data would be like the first set of data that you would want to add to that to sort of figure it out, to separate the data sets?
So we also want body composition as a key piece. Like, that's a large explainer of fitness in and of itself.
Is BMI a good proxy for that, or you want something more like?
Not really.
So like
we
a
actually
DEXA?
have a DEXA would be fantastic. Even CAT scans or MRIs that exist in a patient's chart could exist.
So Prenova, we should get you connected to Prenova.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, we'll do that. Well, I'm sorry, we know the Prenova guys really well.
Oh, fantastic.
Cool. That would actually be really interesting.
It would be super
Ellen,
interesting.
go to the What You Can Do About It tab.
I will.
So if you scroll up a little bit. Okay.
Did you guys Claude code this?
So this was our actual engineer coded this, but Alina did a Replit version first, and then we had a real engineer make this. He is using Claude code heavily, though. Claude is definitely helping write a lot of the code.
Cool.
All right, so here's just everybody knows.
You're already the 99 percentile. What else could you do? It's like,
yes, scroll down, look at the chart.
Well, this is important, right? It's like, I think this is important though. Like, we started this whole conversation about Claude and why I think Claude has been so helpful for my health. This is the type of information that people are missing, right? Like, this is the type of information, even if you're taking this and feeding it into Claude for more insights, which I don't know, maybe I might do that later. I don't know, just saying. but why it matters, right? Which is what I was sort of asking before, but what can I do? Okay. Oh, wait, what?
You've
Oh
got
my
99
gosh.
percentile. It only knows how to do 0 to 50.
Oh my gosh. You broke our
What would you know to
calculator,
do?
Ellen.
Extra 1%. I mean, this is a disgusting conversation.
No,
Ellen,
I'm
I
changing
can't
this. I'm
believe you broke our
changing.
calculator.
I'm, I'm changing this right now. I'm sorry. This was not my intent to be a jerk.
Well, I'm glad we haven't encountered this yet. So, Ellen, thank you for
Leave it
being
to
an
Ellen.
anomaly.
Ellen is out there. She and Brian Johnson. At least she's not measuring her erections every night.
No. Okay. All right. Can I? Oh,
Let's see. Try it. You're just so too fit even.
there we go.
Well, I think what we need I'm still like in this mindset. So we get Garmin, Prenovo, and you together.
There we go.
And we can have, so how we partner with Prenuvo, for example, is like you go and get the Prenuvo once a year, and then you can have the blood test every quarter alongside or every 6 months or something, or you can actually just see the deeper biology is what about your body composition is good or bad. We know, like, we can actually answer that with data. And what's really interesting we're seeing is that it's not like everyone with a high VO2 max has very low inflammation. It's actually, we're surprised at how personalized we're seeing, because there's guys who have very CrossFit guys who are police, firefighters, first responders that sleep 5 hours a night. Very high VO2 max, but their biology actually doesn't look that great under the surface. So
And
we're
I
beginning
bet
to
that would
see.
happen to me. That would be me. Like,
How do you figure that out?
So we're seeing proteins in the blood that are outside of the range of other people with comparable fitness. They have much higher inflammatory cytokines. For example, the proteins that show up in our model are much higher than people of the same fitness level. So perhaps these guys could be even fitter if they could find ways to lower their inflammation. For example, we're seeing this with oxidative stress, and many of these are how you handle free radicals. So the molecular mediators of handling free radicals, for example, are popping up in our data. So it's new biology, and I can't say we have it all figured out yet, but we're beginning to see patterns. When Ellen, this is still, but you can see you'll be living independently, or the
until I'm
less fit version of you will be
117.
living
Like, this is unbelievable. No, but I mean, this part. So look, I know that we're
You
focused
just
on.
got to make sure that you're not killed by a grizzly when you're out skinning in Breckenridge.
I know. But well, the sleep. I mean, we just talked about it, right? Like, this is just VO2 max. This isn't taking all of the other pieces into it. Claude would tell you that because of my thyroid, I'm going to die at 60. I mean, he wouldn't, but you know what I'm saying.
right.
But I think what's important here, though, is like I really appreciate that you have this on your books, which is recreational sports, right? Because if I put this at a normal, like, I didn't mean to, like, I keep trying to make it lower. But like, let's say 53 and let's do 20. I'll just do 20, or I'll do 22. I don't know.
That'd be
Let's just
bad.
see. Right. Okay. There. Now we're like average. All right. So, but here, wait, what can I do? Right. I have to do that. What can I do? So I think this is really important. This is telling me that I'm only going to be able to do recreational sports. Like, I'm done. Right. Like, there's no improvement.
You're not.
Remind everybody what the website is.
What?
Remind the people who are listening what website you're on.
VO.co.
vohealth.co. Okay.
Yeah. And I put it in the chat a couple of times as well. But yeah. All right. I'm going to stop sharing and let's,
Yeah, we got to get off. I've got another call coming up.
okay. Let's
This
wrap
has been really cool.
Yeah. Let's land this plane, as they say. Okay. All right, Carter, what do you think? What are we?
I think we've Our job is to
What
make it easier to
changed?
get
What
to
what
see
changed today for you, Carter?
what changed.
In your
Like,
mind, what changed after this conversation?
we found a way to connect 3 people who are all touching VO2 max and to help streamline Brooks's channel to market. And he laid validity to what we've been thinking about in synthetic control arms.
Well, for me, I'm going to
Mm.
answer it differently, which is that I see what changed as Brooks is basically unlocking an ability to measure health span, a critical measure of health span at scale.
Well, yes, and he's making it so human-based outcomes. If we expose human-based outcomes, then the capital markets will say, we will invest in things that alter human-based outcomes. It costs a lot of money before to get this measure. They're making it cheaper to get this measure.
Yes.
So when we get into a world in which, I don't know, what's this test going to cost, you think?
At scale, the ultimate version of this, there's a world where this becomes less than $100. It's going to start a little bit higher before we're at scale, but not significantly higher than
I want to
200
add
something
this into
dollars.
somebody's access program where people can
But this is going to be $100. We have that other test coming out of WashU that's a toxin test under $100. You're going to have GLP-1s below $100. You
we'll be
all
able
of a sudden the component parts to managing chronic disease become, $100 kind of things. And that, when your choice is spending $2,400 a month on insurance, and your answers are a basket of a few $100 things,
and then the ability to redirect that money towards food and spend money on
you
just a catastrophic plan.
you just you've laid out the basic architecture of System C. Now, the work we need to do, we can approach this problem from 2 different directions. We can approach this problem from, we know how to make A1C, let's figure out how to reduce the cost of measuring A1C, which we should not give up on, but we have that. Or what Brooks is doing here is he's saying we understand that this is a more unified measure in a sense. We don't fully understand the component parts to be able to
Brooks,
translate completely into a standard of care, but we're going to start figuring that out next. And then as we start doing that, then you're able to say, take the test, understand where you are, and then N of 1, here's your standard of care.
okay, so do this one thing. What can people do, Brooks, to get what they need to have a VO2 to go to? So everybody should do X. Brooks is going to tell you. And then you should go to vohealth.co and take the test under tools with that score that Brooks is going to tell you right now how to get that score. So what do people do to get their rough VO2 without doing the torture chamber?
So if you have a wearable or a Apple Watch, Fitbit, Garmin, Whoop, I believe we actually have instructions on our websites to find your VO2 max score from your wearable if you've never seen it before, and you can use that to plug in.
Perfect. So everybody that's listening should do that. Otherwise, you can do what?
I would say the alternatives are not so fun, but one of the best studied ways is the Cooper 12-minute all-out run test. Go to a track or a treadmill and run as far as you can in 12 minutes.
And what if somebody hasn't run in 1,000 years or doesn't even know how to run? Do you have to find a hill? Is that the hill thing?
I would say the hill thing. And there's not a good standardized measure that I'm aware of, but this is homework for me to figure that out.
Okay. All right. We don't have a plan. So, a tease for next week is that, it's not even a tease. Anybody who is open on Tuesday mornings from 9 to 9:30, Kelly Springer and I started Unprocessed and Unfiltered, where we talk about how we move from cheap calories over to eating nutrient dense for outcomes, but on a let's have a cup of coffee and talk about it level in the mornings for 30 minutes. And I don't know who our guest is next week or what we're going to do, but that's where we
We'll
are.
figure it out.
So
I'm
thank
late.
you
I'm a minute
both,
late.
Carter. Thank you, Brooks Leitner, for joining us.
Thank you.
And bye, Carter Williams. And this is another episode of Food is Health. Thank you for joining on this fine Friday afternoon.